It started with a lie, the kind you tell yourself so often it starts to feel like the truth. The lie was that this time, it would be different. That a daughter's wedding day held a magic powerful enough to erase years of silence, to mend a chasm carved by contempt. I repeated this lie to myself as I stood before the mirror, my own reflection a stranger in a wine-colored dress, a woman of 67 years trying to look like she belonged in her own life. The lie was the only thing holding me together. And then, in a room filled with 200 people, with the clinking of champagne glasses and the soft melody of a string quartet, my daughter looked at me, lifted her glass, and with a voice as cold and sharp as broken glass, she told the truth. You can leave. 3 hours earlier, the lie was still warm and alive in my chest. I stood in my small bedroom, the air thick with the scent of old books and the faint, sweet perfume of the single rose I kept in a bud vase on my dresser. The wine-colored dress felt heavy on my shoulders, a borrowed armor for a battle I wasn't sure how to fight. I had bought it on clearance, the fabric a soft, forgiving silk that whispered of elegance, of a life I had only ever provided for someone else. At 67, I knew my body was a roadmap of a hard-lived life. My hands were knotted with arthritis, the price of a lifetime spent scrubbing floors and kneading dough. My back ached with a deep, familiar pain, a constant reminder of double shifts and nights spent sleeping in a chair because I was too tired to climb the stairs. But in that dress, with my mother's pearl earrings clipped to my lobes, I felt a flicker of the woman I used to be, the woman who believed in fairy tales and happy endings, the woman who believed a mother's love was enough. My stomach was a tight knot of nerves. The coffee on my nightstand had gone cold, untouched. A single piece of toast sat on a plate, a few bites taken before the anxiety became too much to swallow. Today was not just Brooke's wedding day. It was my day of judgment. For years I had felt her pulling away, each unanswered call a snip of the thread that connected us, each holiday spent with her chosen family, a door slammed in my face. I had told myself it was a phase, that she was busy building her career, that the world she now inhabited was so different from my own that she had simply forgotten how to navigate back to me. But today, at her wedding, in front of everyone she held dear, she would have to see me. She would have to acknowledge me. Today, my daughter will see me. I whispered to the tired woman in the mirror, my voice a fragile prayer. I practiced a smile, stretching my lips over my teeth, but it felt like a grimace. It didn't reach my eyes, which were already stinging with the thread of tears. The sharp ring of the telephone cut through the quiet. It was my sister Diane. Her voice, usually a warm and steady comfort, was laced with something else. Caution. Maggie, are you sure about this? Are you ready? I tried to inject a confidence I didn't feel into my reply. More than ready, Dee. It's her wedding day. A mother belongs at her daughter's wedding. I could almost hear her sigh through the phone line. I know, Mags. But you know how Brooke can be. Just protect your heart, okay? Protect my heart? It was a funny thing to say, like telling someone to shield a pile of dust from the wind. What was left of my heart was already in 1,000 pieces, scattered across the years of sacrifice I had laid at my daughter's feet. Every piece was a memory, a choice I had made, believing it was paving her path to a better life. I wish I could tell you that I resented the sacrifices. I wish I could say that I looked back with bitterness, but that wouldn't be the truth. The truth is, every single one felt like an act of love, a testament to a promise I had made to her father on his deathbed. He was gone in an instant, a heart attack at 45, leaving me with a 12-year-old daughter and a mountain of debt that seemed to grow taller with every sunrise. Brooke was his entire world, and in the suffocating silence of the days that followed his funeral, I swore I would be enough for both of us. I would be her mother and her father, her soft place to land and her rock to lean on. I just never imagined how much of myself I would have to carve away to keep that promise. I sold my life in pieces. First went the silver flatware we'd received as a wedding gift, its polished gleam replaced by the cold, hard cash that paid for Brooke's braces. Then went the small collection of gold jewelry my husband had given me over the years. each piece a memory. A birthday, an anniversary, melted down to pay for a school trip I couldn't bear for her to miss. I took on a second job, then a third. My days were a blur of waitressing at the Greasy Spoon downtown, the smell of bacon and burnt coffee clinging to my hair, my pockets heavy with quarters and dimes. My nights were spent on my hands and knees in empty office buildings, the harsh scent of ammonia burning my nostrils as I scrubbed away the day's grime, my own exhaustion, a dull, constant ache. I saw Brooke in snatches, leaving notes on the kitchen counter, catching a glimpse of her sleeping face when I stumbled home long after midnight. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it was for her. The biggest piece I sold was our home, the small bungalow where we'd brought Brooke home from the hospital, where she'd taken her first steps, where every wall held the ghost of her father's laughter. The for sale sign on the lawn felt like a betrayal, but her college acceptance letter was in my hand, and the tuition bill was a number so large I couldn't comprehend it. We moved into a cramped, one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat, the constant rumble of the machines a soundtrack to our new, smaller life. Brooke hated it. She complained about the noise, the smell, the shame of having her friends see where she lived. I swallowed my own grief and promised her it was worth it. "This is your launch pad, sweetie," I'd say, my voice bright and false. "From here, you can go anywhere." The final sacrifice was the one that broke me. It was her final semester, a bill I hadn't anticipated, and I had nothing left to sell, nothing except the thin gold band on my left hand. I remember the jeweler, a kind man with sad eyes, weighing it in his palm. He didn't look at me as he named the price, a sum that was both insultingly small and the answer to my prayers. I walked out of that pawn shop with a check in my pocket and a naked, pale strip of skin on my finger. That night, I cried for the first time since my husband died. I cried for the man I had lost, for the life we were supposed to have, and for the chilling realization that in my quest to give my daughter the world, I had given away every piece of myself. For me, love was never just a word. It was the ache in my bones, the burn of cleaning chemicals, the empty space on my finger. It was survival. And I truly, foolishly believed that one day my daughter would understand. The church in Maple Falls was a vision from a storybook, exactly as Brooke had described her dream wedding to me when she was a little girl playing dress-up with my old scarves. Sunlight, fractured into a kaleidoscope of colors by the stained glass windows, danced across pews adorned with white lilies and trailing pink ribbons. It was breathtaking. I arrived early, my hands clutching a large, silver-wrapped box. Inside was a complete set of fine china, the pattern one Brooke had pointed out in a magazine years ago. I had paid for it in installments over 2 years, a secret I kept, imagining the look on her face when she opened it. I wanted to be close to the front, to see her face as she walked down the aisle, to catch her eye and send her a silent message of love and pride. I took a hopeful step toward the front row, but a young man in a crisp suit and a clipboard stepped into my path, his smile polite but firm. "Excuse me, ma'am. These rows are reserved for the immediate family." My breath caught in my throat. I'm the bride's mother." My voice was a thin, reedy thing, barely audible over the organ music. He scanned his list, a frown creasing his brow. He ran his finger down the page once, then twice. "Ah, yes. Carter, you're listed for row 5 on the aisle." Row 5. The words echoed in the cavernous space of the church. Not family. A guest. I felt a flush of heat creep up my neck as he gestured vaguely behind him. I wanted to argue, to demand he check again, to shout that I was more than immediate family. I was the very foundation upon which this day was built. But the practiced smile I had worn all morning was now cemented in place, a mask of polite acceptance. I nodded, turned, and walked to row 5, my dignity a tattered cloak around my shoulders. I sat on the hard wooden pew, the heavy gift box resting at my feet, and watched as strangers, Noah's parents, his siblings, friends I'd never seen before, filled the seats where I was supposed to be. I watched them laugh and embrace, a tight-knit circle of love and belonging. And I had never felt more alone in my life. The reception hall was even more magical. A fairy tale setting, overlooking a garden twinkling with 1,000 tiny lights. Tables draped in ivory linens held towering centerpieces of pale roses, and the air smelled of flowers and expensive perfume. It was a world away from the greasy spoon and the one-bedroom apartment over the laundromat. It was the world I had bought for her, piece by painful piece. But my place in it was at table number 8, tucked away in a corner so close to the swinging kitchen doors that I could feel a gust of air and smell the scent of garlic bread every time a server rushed past. From my seat, the head table was a distant constellation of radiant, smiling people. Brooke and Noah were the twin suns at its center, glowing under the warm light of the chandeliers. The china set, my carefully chosen offering, sat beside my chair, feeling large and out of place. I tried to make conversation with the other occupants of my designated corner. They were polite but distant, a collection of her father's distant cousins and a few of her parents' old business associates. Obligation guests. During the awkward introductions, a kind-faced older woman, a second cousin I hadn't seen in 30 years, leaned toward me. "And how do you know the happy couple?" "A friend of the family?" she asked, her voice warm. The words caught in my throat, thick with unshed tears. "I'm her mother," I managed to say, my voice soft but steady. The woman's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Her gaze flickered from me to the head table, where Brooke was laughing at something Noah had whispered, and then back again. Confusion clouded her features. She didn't say anything else, but she didn't have to. Her look was a mirror of my own bewilderment. How had this happened? How had the role of mother of the bride been relegated to a seat by the kitchen, a stranger among strangers, invisible to the one person I had given everything to see? When the clinking of a glass announced the start of the toasts, a foolish, stubborn sliver of hope reignited in my chest. This would be it. This would be the moment she would stand, her eyes searching the crowd until they found mine. She would raise her glass and finally acknowledge the journey that had brought her to this perfect day. Noah went first, his voice strong and full of love as he thanked his parents, his friends, his family. He was charming and gracious, and the room adored him. Then it was Brooke's turn. She rose, a vision in white, her cheeks flushed with happiness and champagne. She looked ethereal, every inch the princess I had always told her she was. She lifted her glass and her eyes scanned the room. My heart hammered against my ribs. I held my breath. "I want to thank all the special people who have become my true family," she began, her voice ringing with emotion. "The friends who stood by me when I needed them most. The colleagues who supported me and pushed me forward. Each word landed like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I've learned something so important over the years," she continued, her smile impossibly bright. "Family isn't always about blood. It's about the people who choose you, who lift you up, who make you happy." Her gaze swept past my table without a flicker of recognition. She toasted her bridesmaids, her mentor from work, her college roommate. And with every name she listed, the chasm between us widened, becoming an impassable canyon. Then her eyes found mine. For the first time all night, she looked directly at me. But there was no love in her gaze, no gratitude, no flicker of warmth. There was only a cold, hard contempt that froze the marrow in my bones. The polite applause that followed her toast felt deafening. The guests could feel it, the tension that suddenly crackled in the air, Their eyes darted from her to me and back again, a silent, awkward tennis match of pity and curiosity. My hand tightened around the stem of my water glass, my knuckles white. I hadn't taken a single sip of the expensive wine at my place setting, and then Brooke's voice cut through the murmurs again, as sharp and clean as a surgeon's blade. "And there are some people," she said, her eyes still locked on mine, "who simply don't belong here tonight. People who bring nothing but bitterness and negativity into our lives. People who have no right to share in our joy." A collective gasp, soft but audible, rippled through the room. The air grew thick, heavy with unspoken questions. Her next words were not spoken. They were fired, a direct shot aimed at my already shattered heart. "Mom," she said, the word a poison dart. "You can leave." For a moment, the world stopped. The music, the laughter, the clatter of forks, it all faded into a roaring silence in my ears. 200 faces swiveled in my direction, a sea of pity, shock, and morbid curiosity. The heat that rushed to my face was so intense it felt like a physical flame, scorching me from the inside out. My body began to tremble, an uncontrollable tremor that started in my hands and spread through my entire being. But somewhere, deep inside the wreckage of my heart, a spark of defiance flickered. I would not crumble. I would not give her the satisfaction of watching me break. With a slowness that felt both agonizing and deliberate, I forced myself to my feet. I smoothed the folds of my wine-colored dress, a futile gesture of composure. My trembling hands reached for the linen napkin beside my plate and placed it carefully on the table. Every eye was on me, a crushing weight of judgment and speculation. I took one step, then another, my legs feeling like they were moving through wet cement. I had barely cleared my chair when the sound of another chair scraping violently against the floor sliced through the tension. It was Noah. He was on his feet, his face a mask of thunderous disbelief. He stood tall and unmoving, his jaw set in a line so hard it looked like it was carved from stone. Brooke, her face a mess of confusion and panic, grabbed his arm. "Noah, sit down," she hissed, her voice a frantic whisper. "What are you doing?" "Don't make this worse." He pulled his arm from her grasp without even looking at her. His eyes were fixed on me for a moment, an unreadable expression in their depths, and then he turned and strode with purpose toward the microphone at the head table. The room, which had been buzzing with shocked whispers, fell into a sudden, absolute silence. Even the servers, frozen mid-stride, stood like statues. Noah reached the microphone. He looked at me, then back at his new bride, the woman who had just publicly disowned her own mother. His voice, when he spoke, was not loud, but it carried a weight that commanded the attention of every person in that hall. "Before her mother leaves," he said, his words slow and deliberate, "there are a few things you all need to know." The silence in the room was no longer just a lack of sound. It was a living entity, a heavy blanket that smothered every breath. Brooke stood frozen, her hand still outstretched from where she had tried to grab Noah's arm, her face a canvas of dawning horror. Her perfect day, her curated narrative, was about to be ripped to shreds. Noah's gaze was unwavering as he looked out at the sea of stunned faces. "When Brooke and I first met," he began, his voice steady and clear, "she told me stories about her mother. She painted a picture of a woman who was bitter, controlling, and impossible to please. A woman who, in her words, had made her childhood a misery and only brought pain into her life." He paused, letting the words hang in the air, letting the guest remember the toast Brooke had just made about her chosen family. "And I believed her," he continued, a note of self-reproach in his tone. "I loved her, so I trusted her. It never occurred to me to question the story she was telling." Whispers erupted like wildfire, spreading from table to table. I stood rooted to the spot, my body still trembling, caught between the urge to flee and the paralyzing need to hear what he would say next. He had spoken to Diane, my sister, my fierce, loyal protector. A month ago, she had called me, her voice tight with anger after a brief cold conversation with Brooke about wedding plans. "She's telling him lies about you, Maggie," Diane had said. "She's erasing you." "I can't stand by and watch her do it." I had begged her not to interfere, still clinging to that fragile hope that Brooke would come around. I had no idea she had taken matters into her own hands. "A month ago," Noah's voice boomed through the speakers, silencing the whispers. "I had a conversation with Diane Miller. For those of you who don't know, that's Brooke's aunt, Maggie's sister. And I learned a very, very different story." He looked directly at me then, and for the first time I saw not pity in a stranger's eyes, but a deep, profound respect. "I learned that Maggie Carter is not a bitter woman. She is a widow who lost her husband when her daughter was only 12 years old. I learned that she raised that daughter completely on her own, without a cent of help from anyone." His words were a vindication, each one a balm on a wound I didn't even know was still bleeding. "I learned that she worked double shifts, waitressing by day and cleaning offices by night, just to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. She did this for years, sacrificing her health, her sleep, her entire life, so that her daughter could have a future." My knees felt weak, and I gripped the back of a chair for support. The faces of the guests were turned toward me now, their expression shifting from curiosity to shock to a dawning, uncomfortable understanding. Brooke's face had gone from pale to ashen. "Noah, please," she whimpered, her voice barely a whisper. "Not here. Not now." He ignored her completely. His focus was on the truth, a truth that had been buried for far too long. "I learned that when it came time for college, Maggie sold her house, the home where she had raised her family, the last physical connection she had, to her late husband, to pay for Brooke's tuition. I learned she sold every piece of jewelry she owned, and when that still wasn't enough, I learned that she sold her own wedding ring to pay for Brooke's final semester." A collective gasp swept through the room, louder this time, sharp and horrified. I saw the kind-faced woman from my table press a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. Noah's voice grew harder, laced with a cold fury that seemed to chill the air.
"This is the bitter, controlling woman Brooke told me about."
The woman who gave up everything, who went into debt to cover an emergency surgery when Brooke was sick in her sophomore year. The woman who has lived in a tiny apartment for 20 years so her daughter could have the best of everything. He let that sink in before delivering the final, devastating blow.
"And do you know how many times Brooke has visited her mother in the last 3 years?
In that tiny apartment her sacrifices paid for?" He scanned the room, his eyes daring anyone to answer.
3 times. And do you know how many of her mother's phone calls she has answered in the last year? None."
The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by a single choked sob from Brooke. Noah's hand tightened around the microphone, his knuckles white. "I thought I knew the woman I was marrying," he said, his voice dropping, becoming more personal, more filled with a raw, painful disillusionment. "I thought I was marrying a woman of character, of compassion, of gratitude. But the truth is, I don't recognize this person standing beside me. I don't recognize the version of her who can stand here, in a dress that cost more than her mother makes in 3 months, and treat the woman who gave her life with such staggering cruelty and disregard." Brooke's face crumpled, tears finally streaming down her cheeks. She reached for his arm again, desperate now. "Noah, stop it! You're ruining everything!" "This is exactly where it needs to be said," he replied, his voice calm but unyielding as he gently stepped back out of her reach. "This is exactly what everyone who is celebrating you tonight needs to see. The real you." He looked from her tear-streaked face to my stunned one, and then out at the 200 guests who sat in breathless silence. Then, slowly, with a gesture that was both quiet and earth-shattering, he reached for his left hand. Deliberately, he slipped the brand-new wedding band from his finger. The simple circle of gold, a symbol of vows made only hours earlier, caught the light of the chandeliers, a tiny, brilliant star. He placed it on the white linen of the head table, directly in front of Brooke. The sound it made was barely a click, but in the dead silence of the room, it echoed like a gunshot. Someone near the back dropped the glass, and the sound of it shattering on the floor was the only thing that broke the spell.
"I can't," Noah said, his voice firm, resolute, and filled with a sorrow that was almost palpable.
"I can't marry a woman who is capable of such cruelty to the very person who gave her everything." The hall erupted. It wasn't applause or cheers. It was a chaotic storm of whispers, gasps, and the scraping of chairs as people turned to each other, their faces masks of utter shock. My own humiliation, which had been a burning flame, was suddenly extinguished, replaced by a bewildering wave of something else. Vindication. I don't remember walking out of that hall. My mind was a blur, a chaotic swirl of noise and emotion. The whispers and gasps seemed to follow me, clinging to my dress like burrs, the humiliation a living thing with legs, chasing me out into the cool night air. I stumbled through the manicured garden, my borrowed elegance forgotten, and collapsed onto a wooden bench beneath a string of glowing paper lanterns. The sharp night air was a shock against my tear-soaked cheeks. I hadn't even realized I was crying. My chest heaved with great gulping breaths, my body trying to expel the years of pain and silence I had held inside for so long. For the first time all evening, I could breathe, without the crushing weight of hundreds of eyes on me, without the suffocating pretense of a smile. I stared back at the glowing windows of the reception hall, a world of chaos and shattered dreams that I had just escaped. My small clutch purse buzzed in my hand. It was Diane. I answered, my hand still shaking. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the fierce emotion simmering just beneath the surface. "Maggie, Noah just called me. He told me everything he did. Are you all right? Where are you?" I tried to form a word, but all that came out was a strangled sob. "I don't know," I finally whispered, my voice breaking. "I don't know what I feel." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Diane's voice came back, soft but firm. "Feel proud, Maggie. You feel proud. Tonight someone finally stood up for you. Someone finally told the truth and defended your honor." She took a deep breath. "And Brooke? Well, Brooke just learned a lesson she has been running from her entire life. Actions have consequences." I closed my eyes, letting her words sink in, a soothing balm on a wound that had been open and festering for years. Someone defended my honor. The thought was so foreign, so overwhelming that it brought a fresh wave of tears. For my entire life, I had been the defender, the protector, the one who fought for everyone else. I had never had a champion of my own. I sat on that bench for what felt like an eternity, the cool night air seeping into my bones, my beautiful dress now feeling like a costume from another life. But as the minutes passed, a strange and unfamiliar feeling began to build in a hollow space inside my chest. It was a quiet, steady strength. For years I had organized my life around the hope of my daughter's love. I had excused her coldness, rationalized her distance, and clung to the desperate belief that if I just loved her enough, if I was patient enough, she would eventually find her way back to me. I had been begging for scraps of affection from the one person who should have given it freely. As I wiped the last of my tears on the back of my hand, a new understanding settled over me with the quiet finality of a sunset. I was done begging. I was done pleading for a place in her life. If Brooke ever wanted a relationship with me again, it would not be on her terms of convenience and cruelty. It would be on my terms. My terms. And for the first time, in what felt like a lifetime, I felt a profound, liberating sense of peace in that decision. I had lost a daughter tonight, but I was starting to think I might have just found myself. The next morning, my phone began its relentless assault. The first text from Brooke arrived just after dawn, a long, rambling paragraph filled with the hollow clang of a panicked apology. "Mom, I am so sorry. I don't know what happened. I was nervous. I drank too much champagne. I didn't mean any of it. Please, you have to believe me." I stared at the words on the glowing screen, my heart a heavy, unresponsive stone in my chest. I didn't reply. An hour later, another message came through, the tone already beginning to shift. "Are you seriously not going to answer me? After everything that happened? Noah left me, Mom. He's gone. My life is ruined, and you're giving me the silent treatment?" Still, I said nothing. I was at Diane's house, wrapped in her old quilt on a sofa, sipping a cup of tea that she had placed in my hands. She read the messages over my shoulder, her expression grim. By evening, the facade of remorse had crumbled completely, revealing the familiar, ugly framework of manipulation beneath. "You know, this is your fault. You've always judged me. You have no idea the kind of pressure I'm under. You just wanted to see me fail, to make me as miserable as you are. You probably planned this with Noah." And then came the final desperate threat, the one she had always used as her last resort, the one that had always worked before. "If you don't answer me, I don't know what I'll do. Maybe something drastic. It will be on your conscience." For years, those words would have sent me into a blind panic. I would have called, I would have begged, I would have rushed to her side to smooth everything over, to take the blame, to fix whatever mess she had made. But this time I just stared at the screen, my heart heavy, not with fear for her, but with a profound sadness for the both of us, for the toxic, twisted dance we had been locked in for so long. Diane took the phone from my hands. She shook her head, her eyes filled with a sad certainty. "This isn't love, Maggie," she said softly, but her words were like a thunderclap. "This is a script. She charms, she blames, and then she threatens. It's the same pattern she's used on you since she was a teenager to get what she wants. Only now she's desperate. He left her. The perfect picture is broken, and she needs her fixer." Hearing it spoken aloud, so plainly and without excuse, felt like someone had finally ripped back a curtain I had been pretending wasn't there. The pattern was undeniable, and once I saw it, I could not unsee it. For the first time, I didn't feel guilt. I felt a quiet, resolute anger. My love for my daughter had been used as a weapon against me, and I was finally refusing to be wounded by it. 3 days later, there was a knock on Diane's front door. I opened it to find Brooke standing on the porch. She was a ghost of the radiant bride from the wedding. Her expensive hair was unwashed and tied back in a messy knot. Her clothes were wrinkled, her eyes puffy and red-rimmed from days of crying. She looked lost and broken, and a flicker of the old maternal instinct sparked in my chest, the urge to pull her in, to hold her, to make it all better. But the woman on the bench, the woman who had made a promise to herself, held me back. "Mom, please," she said, her voice raw and ragged. "I need to talk to you. I need you." Diane appeared at my side, a protective barrier. "Brooke, I don't think this is a good time. Your mother needs space." But I held up a hand, my gaze steady on my daughter's face. "It's all right, Dee." We sat in Diane's living room, the space between us charged with years of unspoken truths. Brooke's words tumbled out in a frantic, disjointed rush. "Noah's gone. He won't answer my calls. He packed his things. My boss called me. People are talking at work. I can't focus. I can't sleep. I'm going to be evicted. I'm behind on my rent. Mom, I need you." She looked at me, her eyes pleading, expecting the familiar response, the immediate reassurance that I would handle it. I drew in a long, slow breath, letting it center me. My voice, when I spoke, was not angry or accusatory. It was just firm. "Brooke," I said quietly, "I have to ask you a question, and I want you to be honest. Do you need me, or do you just need me to fix this for you?" The question hung in the air between us, her mouth open, then closed. The frantic energy seemed to drain out of her, leaving behind a stark, uncomfortable silence. And her silence was the only answer I needed. "If you truly want a relationship with me,
I continued, my voice gaining strength with every word. It's going to be different this time. It's going to start with you. You will go to therapy. You will get professional help to understand why you do the things you do, why you treat people the way you do. You will face the harm you've caused, not just to me, but to Noah and to yourself. And if one day you've done the work and you want to try and rebuild something with me, we will start from scratch, from zero. I leaned forward slightly, making sure she understood the final, most important point. I will not rescue you anymore, Brooke. I will not pay your bills or solve your problems or absorb your anger. I will only meet you halfway. The look on her face was one of utter shock. It was a look of someone hearing a foreign language for the first time. In her entire life, she had never heard the word no from me. And in that moment, I knew the power dynamic between us had finally, irrevocably shifted. 2 weeks passed in a quiet blur of healing and reflection. Then, one afternoon, an unfamiliar number lit up my phone. I hesitated, but something told me to answer.
Mrs. Carter?
It's Noah Whitaker. His voice was calm, almost gentle, and hearing it sent a strange jolt through me.
I was hoping you might be willing to meet me for coffee. There's something I'd like to share with you.
We met at a small cafe downtown, a cozy place that smelled of cinnamon and fresh espresso. He was already there, sitting at a quiet corner table with the large manila folder resting beside his cup. He looked tired, but the anger from the wedding night was gone, replaced by a thoughtful solemnity.
I know this might seem strange,
He began after we ordered.
but I haven't been able to stop thinking. About that night, about your story, about all the women like you, the mothers, the wives, the sisters, who give every piece of themselves and are left with nothing in return, the invisible women.
I listened, my heart aching with a bittersweet mix of gratitude and sorrow. I had no idea where he was going with this. I'm an architect, Mrs. Carter, he continued, his eyes lighting up with a quiet passion. And for years, I've had this dream. To build something that matters. Not just another glass and steel high-rise, but a place with a heart. A community center for women who've been discarded, overlooked, made to feel invisible by their families or by life itself. A place for healing, for learning new skills, for starting over. He paused, then pushed the folder across the table toward me. I'm calling it Harbor House. I opened the folder. Inside were architectural drawings, floor plans, and a detailed proposal. It was beautiful, thoughtful, and incredibly ambitious. I have the plans, he said. I have the permits approved. I even have some initial funding from my family's foundation. What I don't have is a soul for the project. I don't have someone who truly understands the lives of the women this place is for. Someone who knows what they need, not just what an architect thinks they need. He looked at me, his gaze direct and sincere. I don't need your money, Mrs. Carter. I need your heart. I need your experience. Will you help me build this? I looked from the detailed plans on the page to the earnest, hopeful face of the man who had, for one night, been my son-in-law. A man who had seen me when my own daughter could not. And in that quiet cafe, surrounded by the smell of coffee and new beginnings, I said yes. From that day forward, my life, which had been a stagnant pond of grief and longing, began to flow again. Noah and I started meeting weekly at the site he had leased, a dusty, abandoned community hall on the edge of town. The place smelled of decay and forgotten memories. But when I walked through the cavernous, empty rooms, I didn't see the peeling paint or the water-stained ceilings. I saw potential. I saw life. Together we walked the space, our footsteps echoing in the silence, and I started to dream. This room, I said, pointing to a large sunlit space. This should be a kitchen. A commercial-grade kitchen. We can teach women catering skills, baking, things they can use to start their own small businesses. Noah sketched furiously in his notepad, nodding with excitement. And this smaller room, I continued, my voice filled with a confidence I hadn't felt in decades. This could be a craft room. Sewing, quilting, knitting, something to do with their hands, and a quiet corner over there with comfortable chairs and good lighting for a library. Diane, my ever-present anchor, joined our small team, her organizational skills a perfect match for my vision and Noah's architectural prowess. She handled the paperwork, the grant applications, and the community outreach. Slowly, miraculously, the pieces began to fall into place. Word got out about Harbor House, and the community responded with a generosity that brought tears to my eyes. Volunteers showed up on weekends to paint the walls in warm, bright colors of sunshine yellow and soft seafoam green. Local businesses donated furniture and supplies. An elderly woman dropped off boxes of books for our library corner. Within weeks, women started to trickle in. At first, they were curious, tentative, their shoulders stooped with the weight of their own stories. Some were widows like me. Some were mothers estranged from their children. Some were simply lonely, longing for a place to belong. As Harbor House began to take shape, breathing new life into the old building, I felt myself taking shape alongside it. For the first time in so many years, my days were not defined by the pain of rejection, but by the profound joy of purpose. 6 months after that day in the coffee shop, the front lawn of Harbor House was alive with celebration. Colorful balloons swayed in the gentle summer breeze, and a crowd of nearly 100 people, neighbors, city officials, volunteers, and the women who had already become the heart of our new community, gathered before the new glass doors. A bright red ribbon was stretched across the entrance, a stark, joyful slash against the cream-colored walls we had painted together. Noah stood beside me, his face beaming with the pride that was reflected in my own heart. He handed me a large pair of silver scissors. "This is your moment, Maggie," he whispered. And for the first time, he didn't call me Mrs. Carter. My hands trembled as I took the scissors, but not from fear or nerves. It was from awe. Awe that my life, which had felt so completely over, could be so astonishing. Inside, the rooms were no longer empty and silent. The kitchen smelled of the cookies that one of our first members had baked for the occasion. The library shelves were filled with donated books. The bulletin boards were covered with schedules for upcoming workshops, financial literacy for beginners, introduction to quilting, a weekly support group I had named the Second Chapter. When it was time for the speeches, Noah spoke first, and then the mayor. Then Noah called my name. As I stepped up to the small podium and microphone, I had a dizzying flash of memory. Another microphone, another room, another crowd. I remembered the burning shame, the crushing silence, the feeling of being utterly, completely alone. But this time, as the crowd quieted, the silence felt different. It wasn't a silence of judgment. It was a silence of respect, of anticipation. I lifted my chin, looked out at the faces of the women whose lives were already being changed by this place, and I found my voice. 6 months ago, I said, my voice clear and steady, I was told that I didn't belong. I was told that I had no right to share in joy. I paused, letting the words settle. Today, I stand in a place that was built on the very idea of belonging. A place built on the belief that every woman has a right to joy, to purpose, and to be seen. This is Harbor House, and here, every woman matters. 2 years passed, and Harbor House thrived beyond my wildest dreams. We had opened 2 more centers in neighboring towns, our model of community, skill building, and emotional support proving to be a lifeline for so many. Over 300 women had come through our doors, each one leaving a piece of her story with us and taking a piece of our hope with her. I had started writing, just for myself at first, documenting the stories I was hearing, documenting my own. A woman in one of our support groups, a retired editor, encouraged me to send it to a publisher. To my astonishment, they had offered me a book deal. It's Never Too Late to Begin Again was now finding its way into the hands of women I would never meet, carrying its simple message of hope and renewal. I was no longer Maggie Carter, the discarded mother. I was Maggie Carter, the founder of Harbor House, an author, a woman who had finally, in the winter of her life, come into full bloom. One afternoon, I was in my office preparing for a keynote speech at a conference on aging with dignity when Diane poked her head in, a quiet, knowing smile on her face. "Maggie, there's someone here to see you." I walked out into the main lobby, a space that was always humming with the low, comfortable murmur of conversation and laughter, and then I saw her, and I froze. Brooke was standing by the window, looking out at the garden we had planted. She looked different. The polished, brittle pride she had always worn like armor was gone. Her hair, which she had always meticulously colored, now had soft streaks of gray at the temples. Her posture, which had always been so rigid, was softer, carrying a humility I had never seen in her before. She turned as she heard my footsteps, and her eyes met mine. There was no demand in them, no expectation, just a fragile, tentative hope. "Hi, Mom," she said, her voice quiet. "I hope it's all right that I came." We sat together in the lounge, on a comfortable sofa that had been donated by a local furniture store. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The sounds of Harbor House, women chatting over coffee, the distant whir of a sewing machine, filled the silence. Finally, Brooke folded her hands in her lap. "I've been in therapy," she said, her gaze fixed on her hands. "For the past 2 years. Consistently. I've learned a lot about myself, about Dad's death, about feeling like I had to be perfect to make up for it, about being so terrified of ending up like you, struggling that I pushed you away. I blamed you for things that were never your fault." She finally looked at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I know I can't erase what I did. I know sorry is not a big enough word. But if you're willing, I'd like to try again. Not as the mother and daughter we were, weighed down by all that hurt, but just as 2 women starting over." Her words hung in the air between us, as tender and fragile as a butterfly's wings. I studied her face, searching for the old arrogance, the familiar flicker of manipulation. It wasn't there. In its place was a quiet sorrow, a genuine remorse, and something I had never seen before. Respect. "Brooke," I said softly, my voice filled with a truth that was hard-won and absolute. "I no longer need your love to feel whole. I have built a life here, a life filled with purpose, with joy, with people who value me for exactly who I am." I saw a flicker of pain in her eyes, but she didn't flinch. She just nodded, accepting it. "But," I continued, a small, slow smile touching my lips, "if you have truly done the work, and you truly want to start fresh, we can try. Slowly, carefully." As equals, a single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. She nodded again, a silent, profound agreement. As I looked around at the vibrant, bustling life of Harbor House, at the healing and laughter and hope that filled its walls, I knew the deepest truth of my life. Sometimes being a good mother has nothing to do with sacrifice. Sometimes it begins with the radical act of becoming a whole woman first. And to anyone listening to my story, to anyone who has ever felt invisible or unloved, I will leave you with this. Your worth is not determined by someone else's inability to see it. Never ever beg for a love that should be freely, joyfully given. Build your own house and fill it with your own light. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever felt the pain of being unseen or the triumph of reclaiming your own life, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. And don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell for more true stories of resilience and hope. Most importantly, please share your own experiences in the comments below. Your story matters, and in sharing, we remind each other that we are not alone.
kết thúc